Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hello and welcome to FO Talks. We're joined today by Bill Klun to hear the inside track on financial crime from Enron to Maersk Line. Bill Klun has over 25 years of experience in the finance industry, including positions in investment banking, commercial banking, private equity, venture capital, and financial markets trading. He was one of the bank whistleblowers in the Enron fraud case. Bill is now a financial crimes investigator and forensic accountant. He has a special interest in money laundering, government corruption, and complex international financial crime schemes. We'll start with a 25-minute presentation from Bill, and then we'll take questions from our viewers. So please do type your questions in the box as we go along, and hopefully we can get you on camera afterwards. FO Talks is brought to you by Fair Observer, a platform for citizen journalism with over 2,500 contributors from over 90 different countries. And we'd love you to join the conversation. So please do sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, and of course, you can publish with us. Bill, it's lovely to have you here. Please do take the floor.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me. I have the feeling the subject matter is a little bit outside of our usual context for these webinars, but it is important, particularly if you are concerned about government corruption, bankers not going to jail, all the good stuff. And so that's why I'm here today, to discuss that with you. And one of the things in this presentation that I was focused on, and I use him as a metaphor. I don't know if you remember Arthur Conan Doyle's Professor Moriarty. Professor Moriarty was Sherlock Holmes' arch nemesis, the mastermind of crime. So what we're going to do today really is talk about Professor Moriarty, because those are the guys you really have to worry about. And I'm going to hopefully give you an introduction to how, my metaphor, Professor Moriarty works and what he does. So with that, if you want to start a slide, go ahead. All right, well, I think we've gone through this. The reason, well, back again, not done. Okay. The reason I'm bringing these two cases to your attention is that both of them, while seemingly different, are very related. We're going to talk about Enron, one of the biggest financial scandals of the earliest 21st century, and also the Maersk Line cybercrime intrusion. Now, why is this important? Because in both these cases, these guys did not break the rules, they bent them. And that is the thing to know about Professor Moriarty. He doesn't break rules, he bends them to his advantage. Now, one thing I want to mention to you is that I had personal experience with Enron. I was one of their senior bankers. I wound up on their credit committee. I got subpoenaed as a result. I had to testify, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Maersk was just more of an interesting case for me because in cybercrime, people have these generic prescriptions about what to do. And in this case, with Maersk Line, Professor Moriarty blew through all of them, but we'll get into that. So let us continue. Yep, got a slide for me?
Yeah, we're getting that.
Okay, next one. Okay, well, I've already talked about this. I told you that we're going to talk about Professor Moriarty here. And again, this is my metaphor. And by the way, I have not encountered him yet. I am looking forward to meeting him. So we will leave it with that. Next slide.
Okay. And again?
Yeah, okay. Well, I talked about this too. And this is the important point. And this, hopefully, I will be able to demonstrate to you in this discussion. He does not break the rules, he bends them. And why this is important is that the people who bend the rules, rather than break them, get away with a lot more. Okay, let's go to Enron. One of the biggest financial scandals of the early 21st century. And by the way, they did huge amounts of damage. They ruined people's lives. they caused a major accounting firm to go out of business. And the reality is that this was a result of a small group of men who were really super greedy. Now, were they smart? Well, I will leave that to your interpretation. But what I'm going to do in this is tell you what they did and how they did it. So let's move on. Okay. Well, the first thing, I'll get into this transaction diagram in a minute. I'm sure that it's very confusing and I will explain it to you. But remember, we were talking about bending rules. Well, in accounting practice, or actually accounting law, assets are valued at lower of cost or market value. That is the rule. What Enron did is that they convinced their auditor that they wouldn't do that. They were going to use something called mark-to-market accounting, which means they could value things any way they wanted. This was their first trick, because by doing so, it enabled them to make up any number they wanted. So they convinced their auditor to do that, and ironically, the rest of the financial community bought into it. Who knows why, but they did. Actually, at the time, they were considered a golden child. And so whatever they did could not possibly be wrong. So they allowed them to do it. Here is why that is important. By being able to value anything they wanted in any way they wanted it to, they established this really complicated financial structure. If you look at the middle of the slide, you see something called an SPE. That stands for Special Purpose Vehicle. And what that means is a bunch of technically separate corporations who are supposedly independent from the primary corporation, which is Enron, but in reality, it wasn't. It was all controlled by Enron. They basically had no independence. What they were doing is to rob Peter to pay Paul. And I'll explain that to you in 30 seconds. And it is this. What they did is that they essentially collateralized, meaning to give people comfort, they gifted Enron stock to the special purpose vehicles. This stock gave the lenders and investors comfort in their mind that there was something there. And then what they did is that they turned around and issued something called a asset swap back to Enron. Now, what that means is that they essentially used their special purpose vehicles to inflate their financial statements. In other words, it was a circle, and it was all controlled by this little group of people, and it wasn't independent, and it wasn't transparent, and they were doing it simply to drive up the value in their stock market. Anyway, it was very complicated, but here is the thing about it, which is the most important thing, and that is they would have never gotten caught, never gotten caught. And the reason why they would never gotten caught is because it all relied on the value of Enron stock. And as long as the stock was going up, life was good. What happened, and the reason why they were caught, is that Enron stock plummeted. The value of the collateral to the special purpose vehicles went off a cliff. As a result, the lenders, the investors, started asking questions about what are you doing? And in the case of lenders, they accelerated. They said, we want our money back, right? Well, that put them into bankruptcy. But my point is, they would never have gotten caught if it had not been for a weird glitch that their stock price went down. If their stock price had not gone down, they would have gotten away with this for decades. So, The moral of the story with Enron is that, as I said, they bent the rules. There was nothing that they did which was technically illegal. They just put something together that let them get away with murder until they wound up into a whoopsie. And by and large, with Professor Moriarty, the only way you're going to find him is when he has a whoopsie. Let's go on to Maersk Line now. Now, as I said, I just thought this was interesting. I was not involved in Maersk, but I do get involved in cybercrime, and I thought this was a very interesting case. And the reason why is that it's the same thing as Enron. They got around things. They did not necessarily do what everyone expected. It was very unconventional. So this is what happened. In 2017, oh, by the way, let me give you a little background. Maersk Line is one of the largest logistics companies in the world. They move freight literally globally. If Maersk Line shuts down, you will not see things at your grocery store. All right, this is a really big deal. At any rate, what happened is that a controller at the port of Odessa, a Maersk Line operation, downloaded a very innocuous app. It was the Eastern version of QuickBooks, right? A typical application that everybody uses. And there was nothing sinister about that, in principle, at least not in terms of how most cybersecurity people work. They'd let it in. Well, here's the thing. That program was infected by a ransomware, a very nasty ransomware program called NotPetya. And what NotPetya did is that it wiped out all of your operating systems, and as a bonus, stole all of your credentials. In other words, your passwords, your login information, everything. And what happened is that it spread incredibly rapidly through the entire Maersk global system. It shut them down completely. They couldn't move freight anywhere for like 2 weeks. And as a matter of fact, port operators were dragging out pieces of paper to figure out where to put stuff, right? It was a disaster. And by the way, it cost the company at the end of the day $500 million to recover from this. But, okay, it cost them a lot of money. But here's the thing. And here is one of the things about the Maersk Line intrusion I find so fascinating. It infected all of their servers, every single one. They had no servers. Where they got lucky is that at the port of a facility, not a port, but the facility in Uganda had shut down with a power outage. So they had 2 servers, 2 that were still clean. So they were able to, essentially reconstruct based on these 2 existing servers. The point is, if that had not happened, they would have been out for months, with nowhere to go. And the reason why I bring this up relative to our conversation on Enron, same deal. Most cybercrime guys are like, don't answer that spear phishing email, don't hand out your passwords, don't use the same Facebook password that you use for work, et cetera, pretty standard stuff, right? Well, these guys got around it with a legitimate app that everyone thought was fine. So, Professor Moriarty strikes again. Okay, that is the Maersk Line story. And I guess in conclusion, in this whole conversation, bringing in Professor Moriarty and how he does things, and he bends rules, does not break them, does things you do not expect. There is a there's an aphorism that's largely used, and it is, if you hear hooves, look for horses. In this world, particularly if you're looking at this kind of stuff, if you hear hooves, look for zebras. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Bill. That was really fascinating. I've got the first question here, which is, rather than you used to talk about bending the rules rather than breaking the rules, but is it because the rules basically haven't caught up with the technology?
There is truth to that. You know, the rules are slow in catching up with technology. Yeah, no, that's true. But it really is also a fact that people let other people get away with things, right? Here's a classic news story for you on that, in answer to your question. Mr. Trump, the Trump Organization, right? Those guys. All right. Their auditor basically allowed 10 years of financial statements to go by without an opinion letter. They never signed off on it. Never. And I guess what I'm saying is that it's also human nature, human psychology, in addition to technology, right? Because that is unheard of. You know, no one wins hundreds of millions of dollars against unaudited financial statements, but they did it. Now, that's not illegal, by the way. And going back to bending the rules, it's not illegal, but it is certainly unethical. And if I may dare say so, stupid. But, you know, that's sort of it. I mean, it's technology and actually human nature, greed, stupidity, wishful thinking. You know, there's a lot of that there.
Okay, we've got a question here from Gokul. I'm just trying to get Gokul to come online and actually ask his question directly to you. Okay. Gokul, can you unmute yourself, please? Maybe turn your camera on, and we'll hear from you. Hello, Gokul. He's permitted to speak to you, but maybe he's a bit nervous to speak to you.
Oh no, anyone can speak to me. Yeah.
Okay, so he's not keen. So I'll just read his question out to you. Okay. So he's asking particularly about the Indian context and emerging markets. He's saying, what are some effective ways to prevent and diagnose financial crime, apart from leaving it to law enforcement agencies, especially in emerging markets like India?
Okay. That is actually a very simple thing, I think, in my opinion. And that is, you have financial regulation, which is enforced. Okay. You can't buy your way out. You can't talk someone into it. Now, okay, even in here in the developed world, it's kind of hard. And the reason why I say that is that basically financial crimes laws are a little strange in that you have, if you prosecute somebody, you have to prove they meant to do it, right? So it's not exactly all that straightforward. But I would say if you have a financial regulatory system that, enforces transparency and enforces a rule of law, that's the way to do it. You can't buy your way out.
We've got a follow-up question here from Russell Freeman asking a little bit more about this Professor Moriarty that you keep talking about.
Oh, yeah.
How can I learn more about these professor? Sorry, go on.
I said, no, it's just a metaphor, but go ahead.
Well, he's written, how can I learn more about these Professor Moriarty dynamics? What's that one?
Ah, boy. Well, that sort of comes through experience, right? You know, you have to know, actually, it's more of a perception or an awareness aspect. Like I said, you want to find them, you look for zebras, not horses.
Can I ask specifically about your experience at Enron, because you were one of the whistleblowers? So I want to know, Were you looking for some problems, or did it just come across your desk and you thought,
Well,
how can no one else do this?
actually, no. There's a history here. It's a great story if you guys are interested. At
Absolutely.
any rate, I started out my checkered career as a financial trader for a company called Louis Dreyfus Corporation, with a big commodity trading firm. You probably know them. And they did a lot of natural resources. And I was a derivatives trader in the natural resources sector. My counterparty all the time was Enron, right? But here's the thing, every single trade I did with them, I took their pants down. They lost. They were not very good traders. And at any rate, I went from trading to banking, and I was working for a bank that was one of Enron's largest lenders, a German bank called DZ Bank. We had hundreds of millions of exposure to them. So I came from the perspective, like, I know these guys are not good traders, right? I know they're not that good. And, and they touted themselves, and everyone, thought they were like golden children. But because I had been a trader, I was suspicious. However, I went, and this is a true story. I went to this banking Christmas party when they used to do banking Christmas parties in New York, and all the bankers would get together, and we'd eat whatever, the shrimp and the sliders, and talk about stuff. And I was talking to this other banker at Enron exposure, and he said, here's the thing: people normally do not lie on their tax returns. And that really resonated with me because, what you put on a financial statement is not necessarily what you put on your tax return. There are two totally different things. And that was a comment that made me say, well, wait a minute. If I really think these guys are lying, how am I going to find them? And it's going to be, what are they actually reporting as income on their tax returns? Now, I had no access to that, right? Because that is privileged IRS information. However, the way to get to them was by their change in deferred taxes relative to market earnings. Now, this is a very technical thing, and I won't really bore you with it. But the point is, that was the way I was allowed to back out what these guys were actually reporting as income. And what I discovered, and I had 5 years of this, it wasn't a little different. It was an order of magnitude different. So either they were lying on their tax returns, or they were lying on their financial statements. My bet is that they were lying on their financial statements. So I wrote this, I did this whole analysis. I sent it to Frankfurt Credit Committee, and I said, get out of Enron. They're lying to you. So at any rate, I got subpoenaed as a result. Had to go be a witness, the whole nine yards.
Right. Was it at the time that other people were starting to ask questions as well about whether these
actually,
real?
No, I will give myself credit. I was one of the first.
Right. Okay.
Because Enron, I did this like about 2 months before Enron filed for administration in the UK, which was their downfall. They filed for bankruptcy in the UK first. And everyone else was like, this can't possibly be. This can't be happening.
Were people not suspicious that there were so many vested interests in making Enron successful?
Actually, going back to the nice gentleman's comment about how does this happen, and he said technology. No, it's human nature, right? Everyone wanted to believe, and so what happened is, and these guys would disclose it. I'll give them that. You would get these, 300-page documents, right, listing all of these special purpose vehicles, not explaining what they were actually doing, but at least you get them. And what would happen is that people would put them in a file drawer and forget about it, because Enron stock was going great and they were superstars, and so therefore we should believe.
Can we draw parallels with what happened in 2008 with the, the overheated property market, which, obviously was built on nothing in the end. Was that the same story?
Oh, same story. In fact, I'll give you an example if you're interested, and I was involved in this too. I was not involved in mortgage-backed securities, or what they call CDOs, collateralized debt collateralized debt obligations. I wasn't doing that, but hold on a minute. Wait, gotta go. Hold on, guys. Okay, there we go. At any rate, but I was involved in something called Conduit Financing. Same deal, wishful thinking. And all the banks piled into this because they thought they saw easy money, but it was hugely risky and no one paid attention to it. Again, going back, and we're talking about Professor Moriarty here, they don't get caught until something goes wrong, right? An unexpected thing that blows their gears. And it was the same thing. Everyone valued, by the way, it wasn't just mortgage-backed securities. It was everything. It was the CDS, credit default swap markets. It was everything. Everybody believed that this was a gravy train that was going to go on forever.
And did you have your suspicions at the time that this might not go on forever?
Oh, yeah. I was one of them too. I mean, I said conduit financing is a joke because we're basically borrowing money in commercial paper, right? Which is a 1-year market, rolling it over for 5-year assets. Something happens in commercial paper, we're bankrupt. So anyway, actually, that was another reason why I became a forensic accountant, financial crimes investigator.
Were you an investigator at the time, or did that happen?
No. I was a banker. I was an investor. Yes, I was an investment banker. I was one of those guys. But at any rate, that was another indication to me, or the reason why I essentially went on to my second act, that you cannot have this.
And how does it? Sorry, go on.
Oh no, please.
How does it work being a forensic? How does it work being a forensic accountant? Do companies hire you to sort of dig out the dirt, or do you follow your own nose for a story?
Sometimes. Normally, I'm hired by lawyers because of an ongoing case.
And how do you find these, these proof points that prove that, basically there's corruption at a very high level?
You know what? It depends on the case. Usually it's through their own numbers. As I said, crooks are generally kind of stupid, right? When it comes to numbers, they do really dumb things.
Can you give us an example? You mentioned the drug cartels that you've been looking at.
Well, no. I haven't done a drug cartel yet. I would love one, but I haven't done that. But yeah, I'll give you an example. I just got off a fraudulent loan case. And they were definitely fraudulent loans. And they were also usurious loans. And yes, I got all my stuff from Discovery, and I was working for, in this case, the defendant, which is kind of unusual. But the plaintiff were a piece of work under federal investigation for securities fraud, all sorts of stuff. But at any rate, they were issuing fraudulent loans. How I found them from issuing fraudulent loans were their own statements, meaning they totally misrepresented, in their own words, what they were doing. And through their own accounting records, I found out that they were offering, in this jurisdiction, it was illegal, usurious interest rates, but it was their own numbers.
So basically the wrong numbers caught them out, or?
The wrong numbers caught them out.
Okay. What are the sort of big areas of financial crime now? Because obviously cybercrime is something slightly separate, really, I would imagine, to the sort of corruption that we saw at Enron. What are the sort of key areas that you look at?
Oh boy, there's, as I say, there is no endless supply of opportunities for me. It's a market that keeps on going. In whatever normal financial markets, you got Wells Fargo, right? And this was an meaning I was going to say asset management, but retail investors, someone like you, right, who gives their 401k money to Wells Fargo, and they were essentially, well, they've done several things, but in this case, they were double dipping fees. In other words, they were charging you for stuff they did not do. So that's one example. Corruption is endemic, totally endemic. Something that really interests me a lot. Corruption is something that is I would say one of the big deals that really is not being addressed.
Yeah, it's one of those things we think that the developing world struggles with more than the developed world.
Actually, that is so untrue. So untrue. It happens all the time. It's kickbacks for contracts that don't exist. It is some state senator who sets up a separate, actually fictitious corporation to basically hide campaign contributions that he plans to use for personal use, right? All that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And just in terms of the pandemic, which obviously has sort of preoccupied all our thoughts for the last 2 years, has that created more opportunity for these kind of financial crimes, or?
No, I think it's unrelated. I mean, human nature is human nature, I mean, we've been at this for a long time, right? If I can get away with it, I'm going to do it. I haven't. The only thing I can say about the pandemic is that it's gone a little strange in the sense that, well, for example, if I testify, it's over Zoom, right? You used to have to go into court. Now you don't do that. Everything is done remotely these days. But really, no.
That hasn't created more opportunities. Okay.
Yeah.
We've got another question here from Gokul, actually, who's asking about, I don't know if you say them as SPACs or SPACs, the Special Purpose Acquisition.
Oh my God.
Asking your view on those, basically.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you, fraud's waiting to happen. I mean, that's the short answer. Yes, and going back to the comment I made about how wishful thinking and people just sort of buy into stuff and like, la, 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 I can't hear you. SPACs make no sense. You're giving someone money, right? You don't know what they're going to do with it. They tell you that they're going to do stuff with it. They're not required to tell you what they're going to do with it, and you have no control over it. In my line of work, that is called a red flag. And answers your question, I hate SPACs. And I would love to get in a SPAC securities fraud case. It has not been offered to me yet, but I would enjoy it.
Just reading a little bit around money laundering. I was reading about the Us Anti-Money Laundering Act that's recently been passed. Is that something that you think might make a difference?
It can, but the point is there has to be follow through from the banks. And the problem is that the banks are terrible at keeping track of this stuff. They get warnings all the time and they ignore them. So it really is not so much a question of the laws on the books, but making sure that they're enforced. For example, any transaction over $10,000 in cash must be reported. Under anti-money laundering laws. Well, the thing is, they don't do that. They don't report them. They collect them and they put them in a desk drawer and forget about
Why? Deliberately or just an oversight?
No, because they consider this to be a regulatory issue, right? They consider it a pain in the neck. Oh, geez. Oh, God. And figure out which one should be flagged. No, I'm not going to do that because it's too much work.
And I suppose, well, you'll know about this more than me, but banking must attract the type of person who is a bit of a risk taker, who doesn't want to follow the rules. Is there an issue that there is a bias among the people who are in this banking world towards, slightly illegal?
Honestly, okay. I will admit, okay, I'm going to give you my bias here. Yes, banking is in some respects the last bastion of the sociopath.
That's quite a quote.
You can use it. It's for people who think they can get away. Well, that's an exaggeration. I mean, there are a lot of good people, right? There are a lot of people, good people follow the rules, Boy Scouts, right? But because of the system and how you're incented, it is easy for these guys to slip in. And they are rewarded for bad behavior.
And I suppose that's the issue, that the regulators can't keep up with those
No, they can't.
very clever risk takers.
And in many respects they can't. Just from in my world, which is fraud risk management, you are supposed to have policies and procedures in place and enforce them, right? You're supposed to have rules, and if someone violates those rules, at minimum, they're fired, or you refer them to criminal prosecution. That rarely happens.
Gokul has also got in touch again to talk about a huge financial fraud in India that's unfolding. I'm not sure if this is something you're across. ABG.
No, I haven't.
Pardon?
Oh, no, I'm not familiar with that one. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, maybe that's something that we can talk about another time. Maybe we can get Gokul on. He's very, very involved in this discussion. We'll get him to come on and talk about this.
Well, good.
Apparently, it's been a 5-year fraud in India, which has shocked.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. India, in some respects, they are and I'm no insult to India, okay? In some respects, they are the perfect stomping ground for Professor Moriarty, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, because of the fact they have all these rules, but they don't enforce them.
Okay, well, we'll wait for some comeback on that one. Okay, well, I think that he says he agrees with you on that. So there we go. You've got a fan. You've got a fan in India.
Well, good. Well, tell him I'm glad that we had a good vicarious conversation here, and I hope that I was helpful.
Okay, fabulous. Do you have any sort of concluding remarks really on where this is all heading in the future? Do you think the technology is going to enable us to kind of crack down on these frauds more easily in the coming years?
The answer is yes, I do. Because I think in the public mind, right, people don't like this. They don't like they don't like greedy people ripping other people off illegally. They don't like it. There have been attempts, as you said, they passed new legislation and anti-money laundering. We are supposedly cracking down on, well, not necessarily corruption, but we are supposedly cracking down on cryptocurrencies, for example, right? A lot of scandals in cryptocurrencies, theft, actually, grand larceny, to tax fraud, to securities fraud, everything, right? That's on the screen. So I think so. But you know what? It really is a function of will. And I'll go back to my original point. You have to want to enforce. You have to want to make sure that the people that you can clearly demonstrate, right, broke the law, pay for it.
Well,
and that is actually partially why I'm in this, right? Because I can't make the lawyers do anything, right? I can't make them prosecute. But what I can say to them is I got everything you need for your case.
okay, well, thank you, Bill. I think we need a few more of you around to find those numbers for us so that people can be caught.
Well, that's what I do.
Okay, thank you so much, Bill, for joining us today. We'll wrap it up there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, guys. And I understand this is a little bit out of your normal stuff, but I will leave you with this thought one more time. If you hear hooves, look for zebras.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Just a quick plug for Fair Observer. Obviously, we'd love you to join the conversation, so feel free to contact us and perhaps you can give one of these talks yourself. We'd also love to have you sign up for our newsletter, join us on social media, and writing articles for us about your thoughts on the world. So thank you very much to our attendees, especially to Gokul, who's been very involved. And
well,
thanks again, Bill.
Listen, Gokul, you're my man.
All the best then. Bye-bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.